I'm sure. But first of all, she's a professor of American history at Palm Beach State College, but also importantly, and linked to that, she teaches information sciences and research methodology to help students, not necessarily just researching history, but to understand how to use information resources and whatever endeavor they may be involved in. So linking the history, of course, to research issues is something that's close to my heart as a real amateur compared to Janet, a historical researcher. But this combination is very much evident in various dimensions of her work. First of all, the research and writing she's done. She's the former president of the Boynton Beach Historical Society, and she has a long blog library of various historical topics on that website. She's also, however, the author or the co-author of a substantial body of historical works, including historical fiction. I'm not going to mention specific books, but they deal with key biographies of key historical personages in South Palm Beach County, I guess you could say. Sometimes co-authored with Ginger Pedersen, who is also here in the back and who has also made a presentation to us earlier in the year. So not only history and historical fiction, she even has I confess I haven't read it, a book on sport fishing in the area. So you can see her work spans an enormous array of topics and has won awards both for his historical work and historical fiction work. Some of you may also be aware that she has been leading these evening tours of the Woodlawn Cemetery and the personalities that are buried there, which is probably a lot of fun. I haven't done it myself, but I look forward to it. And a final personal note, she has been helping us, the Historical Society of Lake Worth, in upgrading our publishing standards. I don't know if we'll ever meet her standards, but she and Ginger and others and Boyd have been in this business for a long time, and we have enjoyed learning from her. So without further ado,
First, 1, 2, 3. Okay. I'm a little soft-spoken, so I want to make sure people all the way in the back can hear me. I'm really pleased to be back here again. I love Lake Worth, and I feel like every time I come here, I live in Lantana right now, I discover something new. I had a great deal of fun researching this topic, which is another one of the topics that seemed to just fall into my lap. I started by researching Mr. Greynolds, and it turns out that Steve gave a lead in, and he didn't even know that he was leading into this, but both Mr. Greynolds and Mr. Monroe, that will be meeting, so to speak, tonight, who were the ones that put together College Park, are buried in Woodlawn Cemetery. So if you go out to Woodlawn Cemetery or join one of our tours, you'll be able to kind of walk past them. Anyway, so tonight I'm going to talk to you about Greynolds and Monroe's legacy. To start off with, how many of you live in College Park? Okay, so we've got a few of you. So now we know why the house is so full. Okay, who was born in Lake Worth? Raise your hand. Right, and who's left-handed? That would be me. Anyway, so we're not just going to talk about Mr. Greynolds and Mr. Monroe, and we're not just going to talk about College Park. What we have to do is we have to go back in time and think about how this all started. When we went down the road today, you'll see that they're paving the roads. They're repaving the roads. What they do in Florida, in Lake Worth, all over, is they redo all of these layers of history. So if you go way back in time, you would see that there'd be these pine forests palmetto groves, natural lakes, a whole chain of lakes. We have Lake Osborne, but there was a whole chain of lakes going across here. You had the Everglades. The water was swampy. People did not want to live in South Florida. For one thing, it was really swampy. The other thing is, there was no way to get here. The only way you could get here was by water. So when Henry Flagler's railroad came around in 1894, that changed it a little bit. So instead of just the really stalwart pioneers, the real rugged adventurers, you started to get all kinds of people that came down. So here's a beautiful picture that I took the other day. And if anyone saw me out in front of their house taking pictures, I apologize. I'm not going to sell them any place. It's just for visual things. So College Park is one of, I believe it's 6 historic districts here in Lake Worth Beach. And I have the pleasure of riding my bike, not quite like these gents that are right here, but going along all of the scenic areas. So this is in our most northern part of the city. So an interesting thing about it is it actually wasn't an original part of the city. Just like we grow up all around, the different areas are annexed. So at one point, there was this idea that there was going to be a huge metropolis of West Palm Beach continuing all the way into Lake Worth. So probably luckily that didn't happen. So there was this time of political and social change around the time that the town of Lake Worth was founded in 1912. People were coming down, and instead of just farmers, people were bringing their families. So of course, when they start bringing the ladies, they start thinking of this thing called the progressive era. So the progressive era is something where they're going, hey, we'd like to have a women's club, or we'd like to have a library, or how come we don't get some real roads around here? This place is a mess. Get rid of those outhouses. We want plumbing. So then there's this whole idea of improving things. So they're building bridges, they're building roads. You're able to get from West Palm Beach to Lake Worth, which is about 7 miles, much, much quicker. Before that, you would have taken the Intracoastal Waterway. Actually, go back to that one slide. Let me just explain. So I'm trying to look at you and not look at these. But if you take a look at this picture, this is somewhere about 1912 to 1915. And what do you notice about those roads? Why? Keep telling these are really good answers. Anyone wants to add to the conversation? They're actually sugar sand. Sugar sand. These were white, natural roads where some people would think that they were dirt roads, but they were sugar sand. Here's another picture, and this is one of the little meanders that go through Lake Worth. So again, when you think about this, that you're not going to be able to go really fast. If you're wearing a long dress, as women did before the Roaring Twenties, your hem of your skirt would be getting dirty. Or if you were riding a bicycle, you could go head over heels if you had to stop or you got caught in a rut. So people generally would be walking around, and the roads were largely unpaved until the mid-1910s in Lake Worth. This is our Ocean Boulevard. So Ocean Boulevard, again, was a rock, natural rock, and sugar sand road. It was not completed yet through to West Palm Beach. Then a duo that got together started a group. And this duo was the duo of Greynolds and Monroe. And you can see by this advertisement, which was in the Miami News in 1915, what they did. So they were contractors, and they started out with clearing the roads, because we had all that vegetation. You couldn't just make a road. You had to clear it first. Grading the roads, building the roads. And of course, in addition to do that, you would have all kinds of different rock. So where did this rock come from? Quarries, right. So the rock pits or the rock quarries. So just to give you something to think about, we live on the Anastasia Ridge here. This goes all the way through Georgia, all the way into Florida, and basically it is a ridge of limestone. So when you see all of the different places where they say like High Ridge Road or Mission Hill or Chapel Hill or different hills, that's because it actually goes up a whole 20 foot above sea level. So, but down south in Miami, the land was basically worthless except for its mineral count. But just like silver, just like gold and other minerals, the limestone rock down in Ogis, in what was today like North Miami area, was very valuable. We did have some shell pits that were out west of town, but they weren't as big, they weren't as deep, they weren't as rich as the southern pits. So I'd like to introduce you to two men. On the left, we have Albert Otha Greynolds, and then on the right, we have Manford B. Monroe. So I have to say, up until about 2 weeks ago, I really didn't know anything about Manford Monroe, and when I did, I was so excited, and I couldn't wait to tell you about him. So he was born in Indiana. He was born about 1870 or so, and he did farm work in his early life. So he had a hard knock life working on a farm. That's what you did, dairy farms, working on other people's farms. He didn't own the farm. Then he met up in Michigan on a summer job with this other guy, and Joseph Borman, and he decided to get away from this life that they had and to take a little trip down to Florida. So it's 1894 and it's December. So they buy a round trip on Henry Flagler's Florida East Coast Railway, and they're supposed to leave in 3 months. But they came down and they found paradise. The first few weeks, they slept in a tent. Then they slept in a boarding house. They took every odd job that they could. Some of them were actually digging out fill. Some of them were building upgrades. So like when you buy a house, you want to make it higher so that it doesn't flood. And they decided, you know what, we're going to stay. We just love it here. There's money to be made. On an interesting note, his friend, Joseph Borman, became the first police chief in Palm Beach. So as we go through the rest of this story, you start to think that these people, it wasn't random. They were connected. Because you know, if you want to be successful, it's not just what you know, it's who you know. And then to continue on, over here on the other side, Albert Reynolds, he was born in West Virginia. He went to business school and he got hooked up with John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company. So one of the things they do when you are building roads is you need to oil them. Because if you have the road and it has the rock and you're smoothing it down and pushing it down, if you don't put the oil on it, it doesn't stay like that. So if anyone knows anything about Rockefeller, he had this horizontal integration where you own all of the different steps in the process, like owning the mines, owning or the oil and everything, and then also buying up all of the things that are the same thing. So as we go through and we start looking at Mr. Greynolds, you'll see that that was like that. So he ended up here in 1911. So I don't want to say it was a match made in heaven because I wasn't there and there was probably conflict because there always is, but you have the brains and the experience of Albert Reynolds, along with the brawn and the connections of Manfred Monroe. So at this time, they were going to pave what is known as the Dixie Highway. So in 1912, there was a federal law that was providing funds for roads. It was called what you would call the Good Roads Improvement. But you think about it, people were starting to purchase cars. You now have these cars, so you could not quite see the USA in your Chevrolet. That would come a little bit later. But people were starting to think about freedom. Once you're behind that wheel, you can go different places, you can explore things. So as quickly as they could, different contractors were building this Dixie Highway. So it went all the way from Canada, all the way down to Miami. So they got a contract to build the road, and they built the whole Dixie Highway through Broward. So if you don't know too much about Dixie Highway, it's one of our north-south roads. It pretty much runs parallel to the Florida East Coast Railroad tracks. There are still parts of it around here in Palm Beach County, which you'll see along this stretch. And then you'll see old Dixie Highway in certain areas up sort of by Woolbright and 23rd Road. And if you really want to look on an aerial map and see it, you can look at the Hyphaluxo Scrub. So if you look at that road that you could go down, when you're walking it, you might not see it, but that was the Dixie Highway. It originally was a hack line. So the hack line was where you would have mules and you would go along on a hack ride. And it pretty much took all day to get to Fort Lauderdale and super bumpy. Think about your back. So this is now Lake Worth. You have this Montreal to Miami highway through Lake Worth. So what does that do? That puts Lake Worth on the map. So when you start thinking about all of those little tourist places along the Dixie Highway and everything, now you have places for people to stop. So you would have different things like ostrich and alligator farms. You would have bird farms and all kinds of different attractions, orange juice, groves. So now the people are starting to move around. They've got this great Dixie Highway. So the horse and buggy was really being replaced by the horseless carriage. So the next few slides will show you a few different views from my personal postcard collection. Again, this is the city park and block. And what you'll notice with this, if you think about the building of parks during this time, this was all deliberate. This was part of the City Beautiful movement, part of the progressive movement. So what they would do is they would put in sidewalks and lanes and curbs and different things. And one of the Lake Worth residents, Professor Louis de Gautreau, he was a horticulturist, and he, if you notice when we get to the color, he put in all of these different flowers. So he was a master landscaper. So again, you have all these things coming together, and some of these places are still put aside for public place. Now, Greynolds and Monroe got really busy. They were very much in demand in the late teens because everyone wanted these roads in. So anyone that could afford to pay them, they would get different contracts. So you have here, they're in West Palm Beach, they're paving Jasmine, Gardenia, and Royal Park of Palm Beach. Then you see that they're actually rocking Okeechobee Road. And then they get some private things from some rich people who are called the Phipps. So they're even doing the Phipps estates. So they were, I don't want to say rolling in money. And just to back up and tell you a little bit too about these contracts, especially in the early days when they were doing the Dixie Highway, they would use mules and they would also use convict labor. It was a very common practice during that time. So if someone was in for hard time, they would have to do different work. So that's how they got some of these roads built so much. Because someone just recently asked me, they said, well, who did all the work? And it was hired people and it was also convicts. So they're making this money, and there's an ad here. Now we're in 1916 in the Palm Beach Post, and I think they got paid by the word back then. So everything that happened you would find in the newspaper, and it's saying that they bought a Ford touring car. So I'm like, okay. And then I turn the page to the next week, and I see that they bought a Studebaker. So I'm like, oh, okay. This is not just buying that cheap Ford car, they're buying a Studebaker. So this is a 7-passenger luxury car. So in my mind, I'm like, yeah, it sounds like a successful road building business. And it was, not without problems. Oh, one of the things that they did in the West Palm Beach, they were building the school. And they needed to build the athletic field. So this athletic field allowed for all of the big baseball games and things. So you'll see the beautiful school on the hill in West Palm Beach that is still there. And I always like to pull out a little thing that in some of the papers, and it actually says over there, after a delay of a few weeks, Greynolds and Monroe, the contractors, will resume work today on the construction of the athletic field and playground across the marsh on the west side of the high school. Greynolds, a member of the firm, stated that the delay has been occasioned by high water in the marsh. And this is January. This is not even the rainy season. So we talked a little bit about where they would get the rock from. So this is the quarry, and the quarry was owned by Everett Mall. So even to today, you'll see things like Mall Lake. He was a very successful person because he owned this rock quarry, and he also had the equipment to process all of this rock. So we think of rock, there's rock and there's rock. So there's all of these different grades. And if you're doing construction, you need a certain grade of rock. And if you're doing other things, you need it. So you'll see that he's got quarry rock. They crushed the rock. They crushed, screen, and washed the rock. What an operation. And then it'll even say that it's been tested because you want to make sure that you're getting the good rock, right? And then you'll also notice that they're coming down on the Florida East Coast Railway Company. So meet Everett Mall. So it was working out really well for Greynolds and Monroe with their road building, but you know what? They had competition because there was other people that were getting contracts and everyone was after this rock. You could not get it fast enough. So they started playing the blame game. So they were blaming Mall and they were saying, we've got all these contracts and we're not getting our rock in time. So they kind of badmouthed him in the newspaper. So he responded back in the newspaper, and he basically said, oh, okay, so I wasn't looking at my slide because I was looking at all of you, but that's okay. I'm one ahead of myself. But basically, there's starting to be an embargo. So what happens when there's an embargo is the trains, they say, we can't just haul all this rock because people need food and people need goods. There's other things that they need, and other farmers are selling their winter vegetables. So you can't just have a monopoly and ship rock all day long. So they started to place some limits on it. But when they started placing the limits on it, That made the contractors unhappy, and that made the road builders unhappy. So they were going to get their contracts forfeited unless the work sped up. So this is the one that I was talking about. He says, now, if men are so unbusinesslike as to keep no record of their orders and fail to order rock intelligently, ... And he says, I'm going to fix it. In order to prove that Reynolds and Monroe can have all the rock that they wish, you can have it. You just have to order it in time, and I'll get the rock to you. So you're starting to get this conflict. And what Reynolds ended up doing is he ended up partnering with Mr. Mall, and he became president of that company. So, in a sense, he could get all the rock that he wanted. Oh, so let's take a look at Mr. Mall. So there he is, and he is a shrewd businessman, and he's getting very rich over all of these limestone rocks that are at this huge shelf or huge pit that he has down there in Miami. And at this point in time, with his Mall Industries, he's putting out over 50 carloads of rock a day. Now, let me ask you a question. Have any of you ever sat at the intersection where there's a train coming and you see the rock? Mm-hmm. So it's still coming from somewhere. And when you see it, it's not just like two carloads of it. But imagine waiting while 50 carloads of rock pass by. So Lake Worth is beginning to improve. Again, here's the auditorium, and you'll see that it's landscaped. It has curbs and different things. And we're starting to get a bridge. So along with this road building, you also need the bridges to the waterway. So these are things that are connecting. Now you can go across, and you can go south to Del Rey. You can go north to West Palm Beach in just minutes. So what that started to do was that started to make Lake Worth a more attractive place. So people that either couldn't afford in West Palm Beach or wanted to be away from the hurly-burly of Palm Beach, they could come just a little bit more south and live an easygoing lifestyle in a beautiful small town. So there's another view of our bridge. Again, it was a wooden bridge, wide enough that you could ride your Studebaker over it. And then this is the intersection here. This would be the intersection of Lake and Ocean, known as A1A. The sign there is for one of the department stores that were in Lake Worth at the time. And because I own this postcard, I can tell you that it's postmarked February 5th, 1921. And again, this is the Ocean Boulevard. So when you think about those curves, when you're riding along and say you're going through Manalapan, or say you're going through Sloan's Curve, I'm not sure which one this is, but imagine how delightful it'd be on a cool winter's day with the sun and going down these curves and seeing the ocean, because there's no condos that are blocking your view. And then here's another view. So this is looking east. And again, you'll see what's today Bryant Park on the right. And then they were just beginning to lay out the golf course over there on the left. Again, these are all improvements, because people that are coming down, you don't want to come just for the weather. You want to come for something to do. So cultural things, libraries, museums, culture, women's clubs, canasta. No, I don't know if they played canasta. And then, of course, the Lake Worth Casino. What a draw. Of course, we're living in Prohibition, and they built the casino, which was not, it was just the name of what they called the bathing facilities then. But again, see how grand that is. And it was very unique. Not every town had one of those. And this view will show the pool. And I want to say that at that time, I would argue that it rivaled Venetian Pool in a way. Has anyone been to Venetian Pool in Coral Gables, which is so beautiful? And again, that was built out of a quarry. Now, so this was salt water. It was not built out of a quarry, but again, these are things that people are doing. So they want to have these nice pools. It's also a way to, for your body and your soul to be soaking in the salt water. It was therapeutic. And now cars were starting to become everywhere. So with all of these cars, with all of these roads comes a whole bunch of people known as developers and salesmen and all kinds of people that are pushing all of this property. And pretty soon, you'll start to see advertisements for all kinds of 1920s developments, which is leading into the boom. And one of the first things that Greynolds and Monroe got in was Grand View Heights. Again, a whole 20 foot above sea level. It's basically located west of the Norton Museum of Art and directly next to our beloved Woodlawn Cemetery. You'll see that it says it's building rapidly. 35 acres south of Palm Beach Heights, which is another one, Palm Beach Heights. All of these names, you'll start to see that they have kind of a common theme, but they start to tell you that it'll be a first-class property with certain restrictions in regard to buildings. Now, it's not necessarily restrictions in regard to class or race, but in a way it is, because these houses that they're starting to build during this time, they're wanting them to be in the $5,000 to $10,000 range. And this is the 1920s. So what that does is that prices out ordinary people like me. So in addition to Grandview Heights, now they're starting this other one. This is actually called Southland Park. So what you'll notice is you have West Palm Beach, but if you go on the Dixie south just a little bit, you come to another really fine boom time development called Southland Park. And you'll see over there that it is right along the water. And what they also started to do at this time was they used all of this rock to start to fill in. So things like Flagler Drive, if you go along Flagler Drive, that wasn't always curved. And like that, that was a natural beach. So they started to fill in those beach areas to build on them. So announcement of Southland Park, the Heights Land Company, it was reported that 40 applicants were already in the hands of realtors. And I always like to see what they might look like today and what they might be selling like today. So I found this one, 205 Monroe Drive. You have to have a street named after yourself if you have a development, right? And that just sold on Zillow for $4.8 million. So you have Southland Park. And now the headlines scream, building record exceeds millions. So there, that's our own Lake Worth Herald, the front page. You can see it's December 1924. This is 100 years ago, folks. 100 years ago. This was happening. It was a wild time. We think that things are going up like crazy now. We think the roads are crowded with automobiles and people from the north. The same thing was happening then. Let's look at some of these other things on here. Wait a second. So you'll see over here on the left, canvas of town indicates that growth extends in all directions. Street building program acts as incentive to building And the lakefront, surprise, surprise, is popular. And then over there, the taxpayers ask election to float $1.8 million bonds for Glades Road work. So you know what they wanted to do then? They wanted to start going more west, eventually the Connors Highway, and to connect the different areas there. And then you might get a laugh out of the one on the bottom right, which mentions 3-minute parking, because there were so many darn cars blocking the road. And so they said you can only park for 3 minutes. People couldn't even get into the post office. So you know what? They say history repeats itself. It really does. So now this is that same newspaper. This is December 3rd, 1924. Just the beginning of season. And we see our very first advertisement for College Park. So it's saying, extending from the Dixie to the lake, Lake Worth's finest residential district, fully improved lots from $1,650 up. And you had your terms, 10% down, 10% quarterly. So those were common trends. And then a couple other things that you might see down there is now the realty that's selling it. It's called Edgeworth Realty. So this is Greynolds and Monroe under another business name, but this new development is on the edge of Lake Worth. So hence Edgeworth Realty. And we all probably know, because so many of us live in College Park, but again, this is the area that's highlighted that was the first original park. And then over here, you will see the plat. So again, platted in December 1924. So what this was the partners bought up, they started buying some lots, and then once they had enough of it, they could actually plat it and lay it out just the way that they wanted. And it's really nice when you have a big division where you can lay it out exactly as you want. And they were experienced, and they did. So this explains a little bit of how it was going on. So they've got this highly restricted subdivision. And Grant, this is the same newspaper. All of this is found in there. It was like all about College Park, all about College Park, right? 90% of it is sold. And this is the first time you see it in any newspaper. So they were really busy already selling it. They must have put the ads in maybe northern papers or something like that. So now it also says buying all the connecting acreage between the south line of College Park and the northern town limits. So there you go, folks, $4,000 an acre. That's a lot of money for 1924. Again, this was the boom time. You'll start to see that luxury is everything. They wanted to build those houses bigger and better. They wanted to attract people. They were competing with Palm Beach. They were copying the Meisner style houses. So over here on the left, again, same newspaper, December 3rd, 1924. So they're announcing it, and it's already a day late, but that's how the news goes sometimes. A couple things that it'll say here is it says salesmen and sales ladies wanted. So they needed people so bad because they were so hot that they wanted to start selling these because the boom was on, that they were even going to let the ladies sell because women had just been granted the right to vote a few years before that. So it was like, yeah, now the ladies. All right. Now, over on the right, this is a fun little ad, and part of it caught my eye because I was like, oh, the opulence of the time. Yes, how about a new Oldsmobile for Christmas? I want one with a bow on top. So I was excited about that, and then I realized it was a contest. So an opportunity to do something for nothing, get something for nothing, providing your brain is hitting on all cylinders. So it's a trivia contest. and somebody was supposed to win this Oldsmobile. My guess is that they were collecting all of that data and they're looking at you now. So in this same newspaper, this gives us a clue to some of the things that were going on. Again, think December, the holidays are coming. People are coming down, they're getting off the train. Maybe they're driving here. They're looking for some gifts to send back up north. So you've got the Christmas cards. You can get made to order Christmas cards at the bookshop. It's like Etsy of the day. You can buy a Victrola at the home music shop at the Oakley Theater building, right? So we just learned more about the Oakley Theater. These are like old friends now. And then, of course, you want to ship some of that wonderful, fresh Florida fruit back to the people up north so they can just see how great it is here. So tropical fruits and vegetables. And then the one that baffled me just a little bit, not because it was Lyman's, because Lyman had the store, but that he's selling this deep rock mineral water. We live atop an aquifer. This Florida aquifer has the best deep water. You can just get it out of the well. But just like people want to carry around that bottled water, they would sell actually big jugs of water. And then you have the lovely Gulfstream Hotel that is going up. Again, it's taller, it's bigger. There's things which are called elevators or lifts. You would even have a man who would press the button for you and ride with you as you were going up and down the floor. What a novelty. Again, you'll see that they're starting to have amenities so that people can come down to visit. All the things that are needed of a fine, prosperous, growing town. And I can't go through this without talking about the horseshoes, right? So these winter sports were huge. The horseshoes, and Cindy isn't here for the library, not that she plays horseshoes, I don't know. But it made me laugh so much because you know how people like to edit other people's things? Well, back then, the newspaper would get the copy sometimes of the newspaper, and it might have been actually at the newspaper office, but somebody edited it. So instead of saying star shoe tossers getting ready for big tournament at Lake Worth, they said, no, star shoe tossers rounding something for big national championship. It's not a big tournament. This is the national championship. So again, we sometimes like to be the grammar police and correct other people's writing or talking.
It was the National Horseshoes Championship in Lake Worth.
Hey, did you write that on the paper?
I wrote that.
I'll get you for that.
And then this is 2 weeks later. So 2 weeks later, the auto travel south is the heaviest in years. So they are complaining about the traffic. And at the bottom, it says, this constitutes the greatest automobile migration in the state's history, as heavy as 500 a day. And there wasn't enough housing, so people would camp. They'd sleep in their car. They'd have little tourist ports that you would go in, bring a little tiny trailer or deck out your van, things like that. Oh, but Greynolds and Monroe had to keep busy, so he liked having that street named after him. So he looked for some other property, this time north of West Palm Beach. And he picks up one and he says, we're going to call it Monroe Heights. Why? Because it's a few feet above sea level. And again, if you're built up that much, you could theoretically actually see to the ocean, and you could actually see to the Everglades until your neighbor builds a bigger house next to you. So there it is. And he's so funny because he calls it the modern Monroe Doctrine. So, you know, you have the Monroe Doctrine. And then remember how I said it's not what you know, but it's who you know. And it's part of that vertical integration, you've got the Naranja Rock Company that Greynolds and Monroe own. You have the Mall Ogis Rock Company that now Greynolds is the president of. He partnered with his competition. And then all of the other things, the electric company, Lanehart and Potter, and all of those other things. This is a close-up that makes it look really pretty. Again, this is drawn by an artist. So we don't know if it actually ever really looked exactly like this, but this is for real estate selling. So they always try to make the plaques look really good. So if you're wondering where this is, I had said that it was north of West Palm Beach. Basically, this is the road and then the bridge to Singer Island. So Singer Island, Paris Singer was just starting to develop, and they knew that this was going to be a hot spot. So let's start going up here. This is today what we call Riviera Beach. It used to be Oak Lawn. And what I found most interesting about this is they have a big swimming pool, and they also have an artist colony. So again, these are things to bring down the artists and the writers, and people would be out painting their plein air, different things. So just think of it being so lovely. And it's only 4.5 miles to Clematis, or as we say today, Clematis. Here's another full page ad that Manford Monroe took out. Again, I think he really wanted people to know who he was. Again, he really was a true pioneer because he was here in 1894, the year that West Palm Beach was incorporated. It says right there, Pioneer Florida road builder is important influence in city's advance. And I don't think the newspaper just put it in for free. You know, at that time, they started having books with biographical sketches and pictures, and they were all men, great men of Florida. You could look for that online. It was a big thing during the 1920s. Now, what else he says? Commonality, meaning all peoples, president, king, artisan, or aristocrat could partake in all of the glories attendant upon residing on that ridge. Swept by ocean breezes, at the same time being within 5 miles of bathing beaches, lakes, boating and fishing, and best of all, the very threshold of what promises to be the most greatest amusement resort in the world, the Singer development. So there you have it. And this is it today. Again, you can see that you've got the Rapids Water Park there, you've got Palm Beach Shores, Riviera Beach. The name of it today, still, as the plat was, is Monroe Heights. This is not a very large house. This house sold in 2024, according to Zillow, for $365,000. Again, it is in Riviera Beach. And just to give you a little thing of what was going on here, you've got all of these salesmen. So when you think of the people that are pouring in, you have the visitors, you have the residents, but you have all these people that are trying to make a buck. So they're trying to sell different things. Towler and Clark, A.Y. Lindsay, DP Council, and then there's even ads in there for things like the beautiful Coral Gables, Miami's master suburb. So again, these are all in our local paper, but they're advertising even further away. So they're starting to do anything they can do. This bubble is really starting to heat up. By the middle of 1925, speaking of great heights, I would argue that we were at the height of the great land boom bubble. Of course, this is March. Building increases 300%. And because there was so much goods that are coming, they're now asking, get this, to double track the railroad. History repeats itself, right? We have double tracks now with our Bright Line. So again, they're starting to do that. The construction is underway. These are some of the big boulevards. It's just crazy. You just can barely keep up with everything that's going on. I'd love to go back and maybe not live there, but just to like look at it all from above. So here's another ad for College Park. Again, we're just moving along. We're still in 1924, but they're still putting these same ads out. Success is the born child of progress. Again, this is the progressive era like nobody's business. And now we start to see some other information finally about College Park. They kept showing these old ads. So it's like, well, what was going on? So we're now in June of 1925. You'll see that Birdsong Construction is building 6 modern homes on Auburn Drive and 2 of them on Harvard. And then what they would do sometimes is they would let you know who was buying the houses, which is really fun because then you can go and research those people, which is something I do in my spare time to keep me out of trouble. So Edgeworth Realty, and they're telling us about this modern home. So the model home constructed in College Park will be open Friday morning for inspection. And then it tells a little bit about it. It's a 2-story Spanish type and is the first of a unit of 10 to be completed. Work on the other 9, 7 of which will be on Auburn and all of Spanish type, have begun and will be rushed to completion. Because you know what? Those people that bought are like, when's my house going to be ready? They want to come down. So it also tells you that they have the latest plumbing, and the bath has both tub and shower, and there's sewing rooms. Oh my gosh, this is so grand. So someone else who bought a home in College Park was a young man whose name was John Prince. So John Prince was both versed in business and politics and construction. So he would not mind getting his hands dirty, but again, it's not what you know, it's who you know. So you'll see a little bit later that he became involved in the 1930s with Greynolds in Monroe. But his home is at the corner of Olive and Fordham, or near Fordham. So we're getting a golf course. You can just imagine all those men out there in their knickers playing golf. So that was another big draw. These recreational facilities, whether it be horseshoes or bathing on the beach, they're all really important. So that was a big thing. And again, you can see that they were having to make it out of sugar sand. So they would have to fill it in and then add the grass. So here's another inkling, and this is an inkling that's telling you of some of the trouble that's going to happen. So it's June 1925. Remember, I said mid-1925 was the height of the bubble. Road building work along the entire East Coast has been seriously handicapped all summer by the difficulty of securing shipments of rock for road building purposes, congestion of freight. So they're almost going to have to shut down the railroad. So if you can't get these goods in or can't get things out, think of that whole supply chain. The whole supply chain is now getting stuck. But they're not giving up. Down there in Boynton, they're planning a grandiose hotel because they see the Gulfstream Hotel And someone's like, aha, if they can do it, we can do it better. So they come up with this plan. They put a steel, the framework up. They start to advertise. They're going to have a bank on the first floor. They're going to have offices. They're going to have apartments. It's going to have that elevator and the elevator man too. They're calling it the Cassandra, the Hotel Cassandra. 104 rooms, the latest type and construction. Now, if you look over to the right, you'll see that someone on the city council in Boynton is realizing that there's this supply chain thing. So he's like, maybe we can do something about it. Hey, remember those rock pits and shell pits out west? Let's open them up and start digging this out, refining that, and maybe that can solve the problem, or at least until we can sell a few more things, right? Oh, in other places, Del Raton, they want to build their Spanish style houses because they are all in vogue. You're going to really look like someone if you have a house like that. So they also want to make people know that there's not going to be problems with insurance because they say no floods. So again, this is on the higher land so that you're not going to have a flood. And it has all of the latest amenities. So you have the light, you have the water system, and you have wide boulevards. And those were the types of things that these road builders knew. They knew that if you could have roads where two cars could comfortably pass, one car wouldn't have to pull over for the other. If you have sidewalks so that people can stroll along, kids can play. I'm not sure if dog walking was a thing then, but again, that these are going to all add to the values of all of these neighborhoods. So once again, just like the other developments, they have the restrictions. And it says that there's a free beach, but there's really no beach right there. Well, Mr. Greynolds is starting to get desperate. So he goes out hunting for land. And you could actually go up in an airplane then. And this is still what they do today, although they use drones. The really smart developers will go and they'll look around and they'll go, oh, wait, wouldn't a shopping mall look great there? And even today, there's some that are looking at big cemeteries like Woodlawn and going, oh, there's a patch of green that's left. So he saw this virgin land that's south of south of Lake Worth in a little pokey town that had nothing called Lantana. So he buys up a whole bunch of land really dirt cheap. And he starts with his advertisements that he's going to make all of these improvements. And he starts to sell them and he tries to attract people. And the developers then would do just about anything, sort of like the salespeople that try to get you to timeshare. You know, here's a candy bar. We'll give you $1 bill if you come. Free boat ride, free picnic. So they had all of these different ploys that they were doing. So he says, please direct your attention to the map and follow us carefully. So if you look at those light spots on the map, obviously you'll see the whole body of water called Lake Worth. But then those other white spots, those are all the chain of lakes. Most of them have been filled in. So you have Lake Ida, Lake Bessie, Lake Boynton, Lake Webster, Lake Osborne, all the way up to Cloud Lake and the lakes in West Palm Beach. So again, that area in between, the highlands. So it's going to be the latest and the greatest. It's always the latest and the greatest. No one ever says this is like the last hurrah. So here you have from Lake Worth to the Dixie, from the Dixie westward, Greynolds Highlands slopes gently upward to the crest of the ridge, a 20-foot elevation. From north to south is 2 miles on the Dixie Highway. The ocean's just 5 minutes away because they're getting a new bridge in Lantana. He knew that bridge was coming because it's not what you know, it's who you know. So he knew that bridge was coming and he said, you know what, this is now going to connect Lantana to that map. So he's also building new roads, Broadway, which runs north to south. He was going to make that road go all the way to Boynton, thus connecting those areas. There was a big thing that they would do at this time is they would build these wonderful arches. They were archways, like entranceways to the different cities. So they had one in Kelsey City, which is now Lake Park. They had one in Boca Raton that had a big camel. I'm still not sure what that was all about. And then over here in Little Lantana, he built this big gate that said Greynolds Highlands. And again, they're planting the coconut palms because when people come down and they see those coconut palms, they're like, it's paradise. He was so enticing people to come that he actually brought out the band. He brought out that brass band. He had a picnic. He invited everyone in town. I think they said that 5,000 people and prospective buyers are coming to this picnic. He puts an ad in the paper that he wants people to help cook and help serve the barbecue, and they'll pay them $2 a day. And wrote a song, which if someone knows how to play, I can get you that song. And it's called Greynolds Highlands. And it's so funny because it's a song about Lantana Lou. And I don't know if anyone knows that Lantana's Lou just passed away this week. So I don't know if there was any connection, but Lantana Lou and Lantana, he played the Groundhog Day and was quite beloved. But again, here's this song. Bring out the band, have the picnic. We're going to all have a grand old time. Maybe get you a little bit of drink while you're there, and you're going to buy some investment in the property. So they went so far as to actually lay the cornerstone of the new city hall. So these new city halls, like in Boynton at this time, Addison Meisner was going to build the city hall. Didn't happen. Here in Lantana, this says a new $100,000 city hall, 1925. Didn't happen. But this fine article, Greynolds and Monroe, they're still saying, they're still bragging, have built roads and laid town site foundations since the day that Florida first felt the stirrings of modern development. Like we're number one. They were actually featured because of their equipment and because of their efficiency in some different magazines. So on a website, a repository called Hoppy Trust, you can find all of these different bulletins for the different things. So this is Florida highways. And if you look to the right, this equipment, these are one of the things that you would have that would actually flatten the rock, because you can't just have the rock, it's got to be smooth. So that was really fun to see. So this is actually one of their vehicles. Says Reynolds and Monroe Corporation. I have to say, up until about a week or two ago, over right next to the golf course where you park the trailers, there was a whole bunch of equipment here. And every time I go by on my bicycle, I'd be like, oh my gosh, there's the road builders. And there's more of their equipment. Again, you have to have the big pickers to pull to make those things. And again, all those laborers to help do this work. And there's another one that's showing how they would do that. Just imagine having doing all that work. And then this actually is an ad that shows full page and all of their equipment. Again, they're touting that they're the best. Now, the one thing I have to say about Reynolds and Monroe is that they really diversify. So any good business people know that you can't just have your company. So if you know how to do other things, I mean, just like during the time of COVID, when people couldn't have their regular job, what do? You get a side gig. So that's why they had all of these different developments and all of these different products. So we're getting here to the end of 1925, getting into 1926. They're still trying to advertise. You'll still see these big developments that are coming. Boynton, Casa Loma, that's over where the Two Georges area is. Miami, Coral Gables, Fulford by the Sea, Lake Worth. Where is that, by the way? That never happened, at least as far as I know. So we're thinking about the transportation. So you have the Florida East Coast Railway, right? It's not quite enough. You have 3 trains a day going southbound, 2 trains a day going northbound, but it's not enough. So now you get a second railroad system. This is the Seaboard Airline Railway. So again, this is what your Amtrak rides along, and this is when they first opened in Boynton. This is January 1926. They have the Pullman sleeper cars. So again, you can travel from New York to here and just sleep your way. In addition to that, you now have an inlet to the ocean. So the water was getting really stagnant because there was no opening down here. You were having the drainage that was coming out from the canals to the west. People are actually flushing because now they have toilets, but it's being flushed into the intracoastal. So they make a cut through and they build the Boynton Inlet. And when I say the cut, you can notice that, again, as I told you at the beginning, that we're on this Atlantic coastal ridge. When you think about names like Ocean Ridge and places like that, this is where they get the name because it actually is on a rock ridge. So we're back to an idyllic time in history, right? This is the city park. You can see you can ride your bicycle safely. You can sit and lounge, maybe read the paper or look at your Kindle. Oh, wait, we didn't have Kindle then. But again, this is what I want to say, the end. This is the last kind of view you're going to see before that bubble burst. Because what goes up can go really high. Sometimes it can move around, sometimes it can go like that, but eventually it's going to go down. And one of the impetuses here was that there was this terrible hurricane of 1928. And what it did to the cities and towns around here, in addition to the tragic loss of 4,000 or so human beings that lost their life, was that the buildings, the schools, the railroads, the houses, all of the different things were damaged. So do you think they're worried about building new stuff when they have all of these existing ones they need to rebuild? Here's the Palm Beach Post. So this is September, I think it's 19th, 1928. Of course, at this time, they didn't know the death toll would be so high. They thought 400. They're bringing people bodies to find. They're making mass grave sites because they can't have the rotting bodies to give them a proper burial and identify them. So it was tragic. And as we know, the Gulfstream Hotel, they used it as an infirmary during that particular time. So people are not so hot to come to Florida. The next 2 slides will show some of the damage from a book called The Great 1928 hurricane. These are all Lake Worth scenes. And these as well are mostly Lake Worth and Lantana scenes. The Boynton School there in the middle one, as an FYI, that has now been completely restored. Once again, it was built in 1926 and then in 1928, while it was being used as a shelter during the hurricane, the whole roof collapsed. And just in the last couple of years now, it's a cultural center and fully restored.
Lower left is the old Masonic Temple. It's right across the street behind City Hall. It's now only 2 stories, all and been empty for some years.
Wow. But such devastation. So, in addition to this hurricane and all the damages, you now have a financial devastation. So this is the scene from the Palm Beach Post. They're talking about the market crashing. Below it says, fortunes were being wiped out, millions lost hourly, financial disaster threatened. And yes. But in Lake Worth, they didn't have the headline. I don't know if they had not gotten the news or if they were not too worried about stock investments at the time. Again, a lot of people thought that, if you give the market a chance that it'll just, rise again. So what I thought was interesting was if you look at this time of year, this is November, so this is 1929. But what's going on is the cities are adopting their new budgets. They're sending out the notices for taxes. They're letting you know if you pay your taxes early, your property taxes, you're going to get a discount. So Lantana is adopting their budget. The first person to pay in the city of Lake Worth was someone from California to pay their taxes, a good resident doing it early. And then they're still looking at those city bonds. So the city has the money for improvements or whatever it is invested in bonds. And some of the people are probably showing up as, hey, are those still solid? But here in West Palm Beach, there was a run on the bank, just like there were runs on the bank all over the country. This is the Farmers Bank. Again, this is in November of 1929. And then what they did to a lot like what FDR did to quell people's panic with the bank holiday and stuff, they said, you know what, how can the bank help cover these deficits to pay our poor teachers? So they come up with this plan. They're going to come to the aid. They're going to advance some of the funds because we all have to eat. And then they make some cuts. So supervision, incidentals, fuel, janitor service. They cut the black schools, but then they do have the board members agree to forego their monthly allowance of $50. And then this is a great juxtaposition. This is not Lake Worth. This is a standard photo of the Great Depression, but it shows how this whole ideal of the opulent family, the carefree life, traveling around the country in your automobile, and then you have people that are destitute and waiting in line for bread or soup or whatever they can get. I told you about John Prince a little bit earlier. So John Prince would go on to become not just a Palm Beach County commissioner, but probably one of the Palm Beach County commissioners that served the longest and did the most for this area. He had a vision of land and putting aside land for the public good, which is why today we have John Prince Park, we have Palm Beach State College, we have the Girl Scout, Boy Scout camp, we have all of those other things. But he partnered up with Reynolds and Monroe. And then, as we said, that Franklin Delano Roosevelt also came to the rescue. So once he replaced Herbert Hoover, he came up with this idea of priming the pump. So the idea is we're in a economic depression, and the only way you can get out of it is to put more money into the economy. So what he decided to do was to come up with federal programs that would help people put them back to work and also improve society. So you have things like the Public Works Administration. You have the Civilian Conservation Camp. Around this same time, Greynolds has all these different properties. People are realizing they can't pay all those taxes. Places, homes, buildings are being auctioned off on the courthouse steps. So Greynolds has this one former asset, and this is this big, huge pit down there in Miami. So probably some of his brain trust, some of his advisors said, you know what, why don't you offload that, offer it as a park, maybe take the write-off. And so he did. So at this time, you have the Civilian Conservation Corps. What they're doing is they're being paid federal dollars to go around the country for improvements. Young men, usually young single men, they would stay in barracks or tents. They would get paid a salary, but they would have to send a portion of it home to their family. So you'll see, this is 1933. They're starting to have these new CCC camps. One in Royal Palm State Park, one in Greynolds State Park at Chicola. So now you'll see they find sulfur water by sinking a well in Greynolds Park near Ogis. And this gives you an idea of what it looked like. They created out of 200 acres of hammock, cut over pine, and of course that rock terrain. So keep going. And these are the workers that are building it. Keep going. 100-acre addition. Keep going. And then this kind of shows where it is today. This would be worth millions, multi-millions. But again, at that time, they had no idea how valuable the land would be. It was so worthless. And then it became a state park, and it still is today. So that's a big thing that has Greynolds' name on it.
I hate to interrupt you, but we must be outdoing the talk.
Okay, just roll the slides without. Yeah, you can just see the visuals.
Well, I'm fine. Yes.
I know. So there's the park going. Now we're getting to just see some pictures of College Park as it looks today. Oh, Manfred Monroe was buried in Woodlawn, and so is Albert Frederick's grave. Keep going. These are the streets as they were laid out. You can see the imprint of them on a Sanborn map. There's a fire insurance map. The streets and the historic district. Keep going. And again, you'll see some of the houses as they are today. And the lovely styles, so many different beautiful ones, thankful that they're still there. Ones that are and have been improved, some have been rehabbed. Some are on National Register, many of them. This is one selling for $425 in 2016. Fast forward a couple of years, $973 just a couple of years later. So double your money. Keep going. This is in 2008 at 400K, then 915 recently. And this is 1979 selling for $37,000. Today, it still does not look like much, but it sold for $400,000. And over there, 775 in 2017. 1,150. I think this is the house that
I wish I won the lottery.